Welcome, everybody. It's time once again for the next chapter with Charlie Hedges as he explores turning the page on his life and yours. Hey, Charlie.
Yo, Paul. What's up, man?
We're just privileged to have your guest back in the house again here. Wendy Ross is in the house?
Wendy Hooper Ross.
Oh, yeah. I always forget that part. Yeah.
Get it right, will you?
Today we're going to revisit Wendy to conclude last week's show on the subject of understanding fear. Now, as you all know, Wendy is an expert in residential real estate, as you certainly discovered if you listened to part 1 last week. But it is obvious that Wendy is also an expert on life in general, from both the thinking and feeling perspectives. Last week, we started to talk about fear in life as we considered 4 areas: home ownership, relationships, career, and voting in this next presidential election. What was I thinking? Each one of those is a show, so we didn't finish. So we discussed in depth the self-fulfilling negative spiral, downward spiral, that leads to our frustrating lack of inventory in the real estate market. We also talked about managing and fear and the need for taking risks. And then we concluded the show with a discussion about fear in relationships. And we just didn't have time to discuss the other 2, fear in careers and in voting. Yikes, am I really doing that? So today, in part 2, we're going to chat about those issues. Yes, we do want to talk about fear and voting in the presidential election of 2024. And the first fear I must confess to is my fear of even mildly broaching this subject of politics on the show.
For those of you who can't see us, we're already drinking.
Yeah, except I'm drinking Monster, which makes it even worse. So with that, let's bring on Wendy Hooper Ross. Welcome back to the next chapter with Charlie for round 2 of fear.
Hello again. I've been thinking about this. I'm assuming you brought me on to talk about fear because I'm a Viking, and you don't think I'm afraid of anything.
That is true. I love it that today, I never knew that you called yourself or were called a Viking. You could, I could picture you with armor and a sword and cutting people's heads off and shit. I think that's really cool. So tell me, with that in your Viking self, are you ready for another chat on the fearful place of fear in our lives?
I am going to go wherever you take me, darling. I will follow you.
Okay, that's a scary thought. Not for me, but it could be for you. Let's do a bit of a real brief review. Last week we talked about the reluctance of potential home sellers to sell due to a host of deep fears, one which Wendy helped us understand extremely well. The fear of losing or costing more money to sell and then buy again always plays a significant role. And then regarding relationships, we discussed a couple of fears of women post 40 years old, and that's the fear of being alone for the rest of your life and the fear of not having children. Those and Wendy just gave us incredible insight into that. And today what I want to do is I want to begin the show by continuing a few minutes on relational fear, because I don't think we really covered a couple of things that we need to cover. The first thing I want to talk about that we didn't get into, and this is coming more from a female perspective than a male perspective. What about the fear of getting hurt?
Oh, yeah. I think that obviously that's a female issue, but I don't think it's gender specific. And I'm basing that on my own recent experience. Misinterpretations people make because their fear of being hurt or rejected is clouding or filtering their view of the other person all the time.
And we don't talk about it, do we? You said fear of what another person is thinking or doing, and somebody may do something, and we impugn motive. We say, this is their motive, and we have no idea.
All we know is we don't know.
Yeah, and we know there's an act. We don't know why somebody did this particular act. I want to do a whole show on this because I just went through a situation where I was totally wrong.
Yeah.
And all my whining was for naught.
That happens a lot.
That happens a lot, and it really happens a lot in relationships, doesn't it?
Yeah, because the closer you are to someone, in my opinion, obviously, but the closer I am to someone and the more emotionally connected I feel to them, the riskier it is, because the more vulnerable you are. The slightest hint of someone being dissatisfied or judging of you is going to be magnified when it comes from someone you care about.
So those are interesting, that dissatisfying or judging, that the judgment really plays a big part, doesn't it? And in dating, I hadn't even thought about that, but that what is it, especially the first early times of it, what is it if it's not a participating in judging, evaluating, is this person going to, and you're wondering, what is he thinking about me? What is she thinking about me?
I don't know. See, I feel like for me...
It's been a long time since I dated, so you...
Let me help you. I feel like there's a subtle difference between evaluating and judging. You can weigh something and measure it and observe it and try to understand what it is and evaluate it versus putting your own judgment on it. Like, I can observe Tom's always late, and that would be different from saying I'm not important enough for Tom to be on time.
Yeah.
Those are two different things.
Yeah, but you realize where that's coming from. That's coming from the position of the evaluator judger. For the person that is being evaluated and judged, they don't know if it's an evaluation or a judgment.
Sure. Sure, yeah.
Therein lies the fear.
And that's where good communication would come into play. But we as a society don't communicate well anymore.
Yeah.
We don't know how to have the healthy confrontation, and asking someone you think you might love, if they're really judging you or whatever, it's risky and scary, and so out of fear they don't do it. So the communication doesn't happen, and it gets worse, usually.
Part of my reputation as a consultant with business teams, and high-level business teams, sometimes one time working on a $5 billion project.
Wow.
And I was hired because I was the conflict guy.
Yeah.
And that I could deal emotively, I could stand back and I didn't attach myself to either side. And you know what makes me good at dealing with conflict? I hate conflict.
So you want to resolve it?
So I want to resolve it. Let's fix it. I don't want to sit here and live in this. And I think if we did that in relationships, let's get right into it. If we're gonna go here, let's get right into it.
You're probably healthier than I am.
I'm older. Wait till you get my age, then you'll be thinking. Okay, I do have one more question, and that is, what kinds of fears, from your point of view, do women think men are going through in older age? What may be different? Is there something different about male fears in older age than females? Because I know, let me give my example, and then you can do it. 35 years ago, as a minister to thousands of single adults, the big deal was always men in their 30s and 40s avoid commitment. That was, avoid commitment. Is anything like that true of men post 40, post 50?
I can only give you my observations. Certainly couldn't begin to imagine what they're thinking or fearing, because I can't. But I can tell you this definitively. My female friends and I have all done our own study, and we've seen that if a man reaches the age of 50 and has never been married, he'll never get married.
Why is that? I agree, but why is
I don't know why. He just won't. And if that's what a woman wants, then that is not the right guy to pursue. I personally don't care. I would rather not have someone chase me down the aisle again. It's been done. It's been done. I'm over it.
I've seen this movie. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's I don't know why. You tell me. Yeah. Maybe they've just grown so accustomed to being their own person and having their own space. But from the outside looking in, it doesn't appear to me that older gentlemen have the same gamut of neuroses that women do. Because we're still worried about, do we still look young? Do we still look vibrant? Our bodies change with menopause, and that's frightening. And how do we deal with that? And you can go out to any hotspot here in Orange County, and you'll see a 70-year-old man with a 30-year-old girl. So I don't know that he fears a damn thing. I'm not getting that.
Yeah, he doesn't. He doesn't care. Yeah, and especially if he drives a Mercedes, that doesn't hurt.
Oh, yeah, Mercedes are passé for the Orange County, aren't they?
Oh, are they?
I don't know. I just see a lot of Bentleys and Maseratis and crazy nonsense.
Crazy nonsense, and then those same people are hiding from the paper boy because they have no cash. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move. I like that. I think that kind of wraps up and gives us an idea of the fear that is. This one is a lot about fearing what my potential may be, what it may come to, and also the fear of getting hurt and rejected in the process. But let's go on to careers.
Okay.
And this one I know that you are passionate about because you're such a strong career woman. And this is where, as I was preparing for the show, it quickly occurred to me that, man, I'm over my head. This is way too huge. But I'm diving in anyway, and I'm going to try to be concise and watch. We'll do a 30-minute show, which has never happened. Issues regarding careers is massive and complex. I had in my family outings, my wife's family, I had spent a lot of time with a group of about 10 or 12 people that were 25 to 36. And their issues were all career issues.
Interesting.
That they had girlfriends or boyfriends and had relational stability at this point. But it was just that they hated their jobs. And so I was thinking that how many people are really that extremely dissatisfied, and it happened when I was in the world of work, but they're too afraid or too something to try to make a change. If this is not working, if I don't like this, I'm gone, man. You know? But if I get if I've got a little bit of time equity into it, what do they call that, work experience or whatever you experience, longevity with a company. So you're set, and they don't want to change. And I read, and then it's going to be your turn. I read this morning in Seth Godin, I read his blogs every day, and he said that there are three career change concerns. One is the fear of the unknown. Another is the fear of going first. And the last one was fear of being seen as a fraud. That had
to be mostly about the women.
You think so?
Imposter syndrome is, anything I've read, it said that more women have imposter syndrome than men. I'm not saying men don't.
I'm struck with it hugely. I'm always afraid of that.
But there's nothing typical about you, Charlie. There's just not.
Okay, so we won't use me. So you think that's women being seen as a fraud? Do you think does that appear in relationships as well? Or is that in a career? Is it different?
I do think that it crosses all the boundaries to one degree or another. But I've spent a great deal of time around women who have HR-related companies and are placement executives and human capital executives, and they say it's grossly consistent that when there is a job opening, the women will apply for it when they match 99% of the criteria that's listed, and men will apply when they match maybe a half or less, because they don't fear being seen as an imposter, and they just have this confidence that women seem to lack. So it's interesting that Seth mentioned that, but perhaps these gender stereotypes are changing as kids are getting younger. I don't know. I find it interesting. I know that when I was younger, which is closer to when you were younger and getting in the workforce, we took whatever job we could get and just soaked it up like sponges and learned what we could. And unless the culture was bad and the boss was a real tyrant, we hung out until we could find another job. But I don't think we hung out out of fear of not finding another job. And weirdly, that seems to be the case now, which confuses me because the labor market, last I heard, has opened up a little bit.
Yeah.
I don't know. This weird neuroses, this fear, is permeating all aspects of our lives, which is really disconcerting. People really should, I think, across all genders, have a little bit more confidence in themselves and understand that your enthusiasm and your spirit and your work ethic will take you farther than you might think.
I love that. I don't know where I heard this phrase, but I use it quite a bit. There's a lot of people in the workforce, a lot of really, and I'm thinking men, but it would be true of women as well, that are very successful with very low self-esteem, and they're trying to fill up their self-esteem. But you know what they do have to make up for that low self-esteem? Confidence in their competence.
Yes.
It's not just confidence. Oh, I'm confident I can kick ass. I'm confident I can go in. Do you think that has something to do with women are not sure because they haven't been in those positions, there's not a lot of mentors for them, or people, even if they don't know them, people they can read and follow?
Yeah, I think for a long time that was the case. I'm hoping that it's less, but yeah, for sure. There certainly were not mentors. And not only were there not good, healthy, strong mentors for women in the workplace back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when I was working my way up, there were threats in the workplace. The whole Me Too thing was very real. So you had to be careful who you asked anything of for fear of anything happening.
I took a class in college on male-female relationships, and it was actually from that class that I wrote my first book, Call It Love or Call It Quits, and it was what I learned in that class, and the book did well. And the professor was Janet Bennett, and she was a department chair, and this was 1982 or 83, so it's at the very beginning of when the women's thing went out there. It had been going on for a while, but we're crossed a hump. And so many women, she talked about so many women wearing men's clothes. They had designed women's suits that were white shirts and black ties, and so
I had pinstripe suits. Yep.
And it made it. And so she went to a gathering, a conference, and she wore a flaming red dress and red shoes. Wow. This is her confidence and her competence, and she said, "I'd rather be a first-class woman than a second-class man."
Oh.
Is that great?
That's fantastic.
That is great.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so funny that you're taking me down memory lane here, because now I'm thinking back to the 80s when I first got started in real estate. When I was a kid, I was still in school. And I worked for a real estate company that my girlfriend got me a job at, and I learned everything there. And I became competent because I knew I was incompetent, and I really focused on becoming great. And I did such a good job, I was recruited to an escrow company. And I was really blessed to be at that escrow company because that's where I found my first mentor, Georgia Kelsey. I'll never forget her. If you're listening, Georgia, you're amazing. She was amazing. Pulled no punches. She's like, you can't say that, you need to say this. You can't wear that, you need to wear this. Let me show you how this is done. Shut up and listen. She was great.
In listening to you, and this will have to do with the three fears we've talked about, the fear of selling your home, fear of advancing into a new relationship or improving your current relationship, and fear of careers, that the common thread that I'm seeing here is that we have an opportunity in every one of those to turn our fears into opportunities. I know that is so trite, it sounds so hokey, and I'm sure listeners are crossing their eyes saying, really? But it is true. If we take that fear and if we analyze that fear and we look at it with reason, what's that all about? And what do I learn from that fear? And how can I use not that fear, but the learning from that fear?
Yes.
And move on from the fear. How can I use that? And it's like what you did. I'm getting a mentor.
Yeah.
You know, or one comes to me and I accept and listen.
Grab it. And yeah, we may have said this over and over again, Charlie, but it bears repeating because it's critically necessary right now, obviously. And I'm not going to say that you can turn fear off. You can't. Being brave, there are many of these great quotes about this, but being brave isn't the absence of fear. It's doing it anyway. You can choose to be a victim and be victimized by your fear and crippled by it, or you can choose to suck it up and push through it and see what's on the other side. Fear is fairly miserable. Why would you want to live there?
Yeah.
Why not try the other side?
Yeah. And you know what you're talking about? You're talking about courage, aren't you? And it's such a neglected value is the courage to go on anyway.
We could do a week of episodes about courage.
Yeah, I think that's one I would listen to. I don't feel really prepared, but that is one of the things we learn from fear, and that's I had put in our conclusions because I know we won't have time to do our conclusions, so I'm doing them now. But that is, we need to become friends with failure.
Yes.
We need to become friends with. How about this? I never thought we need to become friends with fear. What if we befriend our fear and say, okay, let me take you and let me disassociate and take and observe you as an entity that's not me. Take you out of me, observe this entity, and see what do I learn from it, what can I do with it, and how do I handle that?
Yeah. And I know it's easy for us to say because we're old folks and we've had more practice, but it bears repeating. And anything anyone on earth can do any day to encourage someone else or even remark when they're doing something right, you have no idea how that may help them. The other person that you're observing may be so full of fear that they're doing something wrong that just having a stranger or a passerby say, that's awesome, that could be what they need to push them through to the next level. So if we could all maybe just commit to that, would be one small step towards hopefully improving lives, relationships, careers, whatever.
It's huge with me, Wendy, in my life, and when I'm coaching people and dealing with people, and that is, even upgrades or criticisms are said with the positive potential, and it comes in positive. It's not, but this I have against you. But this is something I see that you could work on that could make you even greater than you already are.
Women learn that about how to speak to other women. If a girlfriend would come to me, I remember this one time, and she said, what do you think of my wearing this tonight? And I looked at it, and I didn't want to criticize her, and I said, yeah, you could wear that, but you look so good in that fill in the blank. Because she did. And she was like, you know what, you're right. I'm like, you just look powerful in that, like you love it. And so she changed. And she didn't have to, but to your point, there's a positive way to spin things.
Have you? We just watched 3. We were out of series because the last episode, we're watching Rings of Power right now, and the last episode comes out tonight. So we finished baseball games, and we had an hour and a half of where we would typically spend with TV. And I looked around Netflix and I found this TV show that I can't remember the name of.
Is it about the 3 daughters or 3 something?
No, Kristen Bell is in it. It's about 2 sisters that have a podcast. And they have this podcast where all they talk about is raunchy sex.
Oh, my gosh.
And she falls in love.
That's my new podcast.
She falls... Yeah, I get it. Not with you. I get it. Yeah, I get that. We've had some times. No, we haven't, listeners, no. But she falls in love with the rabbi.
Oh, I did hear about that.
It is so good. If you wanted just the first 3 episodes, I don't know that I'll watch anymore, just because I got it. They're 30-minute episodes. I got it. But it goes deep into psyche and relationships and what's going on with relationships and what's truth all about and what do we need to find out and what are our fears. It's that kind of something. It's the name of it. But
and she's not Jewish, correct?
No,
right.
She's atheist.
Yeah, so imagine all that goes into that. So what about our cultures and our families and how many barriers is this throwing up? Yeah. And that would be just loaded with fear.
Yeah, shitkas.
Shiksas.
Shiksas. That's what this is what the mom called them.
Yeah.
Shiksas. What are you doing with a shiksa?
Exactly.
Okay.
Goyim.
So we've wasted goyim, yes. So we've postponed it long enough. Let's take a break and let's jump into politics.
Oh, boy.
You're listening to The Next Chapter with Charlie, and this is Charlie Hedges. I am with my dear friend and the brilliant Wendy Hooper Ross, who we've been talking about uncovering fear and understanding fear. And we just wrapped up the last session with using fear to promote your confidence in your own competence. And that hadn't even occurred to me, and that just came from our conversation. So today, right now, we're entering dangerous waters. There be dragons in these waters. And I want to begin with a couple of caveats before we start this potentially explosive subject. And one thing, we're really not talking politics. I've misstated. We're talking voting. And we're talking, is fear a factor in voting? That's what we're talking about. So we're not going to get on one party or another or one candidate or another. That's not the issue. But just this is a common issue with both sides of the aisle, is fear. And so the couple of caveats in that and is, one, we intend to talk not about the qualifications or lack thereof of candidates.
There's not enough time.
We're not going to talk about that. Everybody knows that, and they're going to agree or disagree, and who cares? And I just want to acknowledge that Wendy and I are not experts in this field.
Oh, no.
We are not experts into the psychology of the demographics. We are simply, what I wrote, we are simply a couple of homies asking questions and offering our personal observations. So this is just, you listeners join in with us and think about these and agree, disagree, you're welcome. The question is that we're going to be working with, what drives people to vote for any candidate? What are the drivers that are going on? Now, I did a little research, as you might guess.
Thank goodness.
Yeah. Let's assume that policy of each of the candidates, or perceived policy, whatever, however we want to do it. I even want to comment there, and I'm not going to comment. I'm watching myself.
Don't do it.
And party affiliation, policy and party affiliation, are most likely the strongest two reasons we vote for any particular candidate.
I would agree with that.
Those are, and now that is what we are taught and we believe. That was what we got in 8th grade Constitution courses. But I'm wondering, Wendy, really, I'm wondering, what kind of role does fear play in the voting and electoral process?
Can I start by saying I believe fear plays a massive role, and I think it is followed closely by disenchantment or despair. I think too many voters are convinced their vote doesn't matter anyway, so I'm just not going to bother. And then those who say, might matter, what the heck, I'm going to go vote. I think more people are voting against something than they are for something, which is really sad. There's something we believe strongly enough in. Granted, many times people say it's just you're voting for the lesser of two evils. Then fine, just vote for something. Or run for something. If you don't like what you're seeing, get your butt in office and do something about it.
Yeah, until you get
something changed. But
yeah.
I don't know about you, but I have been voting since the moment I was eligible.
Me too.
I've not missed an election.
I think I missed one. It was in my dark 70s years, dark years, and not my 70 age, but the 1970s.
Like your broody time.
My 20s, yes.
Yeah.
But I too am a very active voter. But I think you're right. I think fear, I like that. Fear of, you said two fears. One was being...
I said disenchantment or despair.
Disenchantment or despair. They're two very different things. Disenchantment means you could be disenchanted with any candidate, any candidate's qualifications to do or their policy to do.
Right.
Or you could be for somebody and then get disenchanted with this person along the process because they've taken a stranger route than what you might have thought. And then the fear is a result. And how is it going to impact me?
Yeah. And I find it interesting, and I'm going to segue a little bit here, sorry.
No,
I feel,
please do.
I feel
Please
like
do.
we look at these candidates and we expect them to be 100% consistent in all ways. If they are of this party, then they should believe boom. And if they're that party, they should believe. And if there's any deviation there, then we're thrown into a quandary. Or we want to vote for someone whose every policy aligns with our own. And that's just as ridiculous as looking for a life partner whose every qualities align with your expectations or your own. And we have to weigh, where's the tipping point for us?
Yeah. And then right alongside of that, what occurred to me, do candidates have the right to change their mind? Over years, if it's just over months or days, and it's obvious you're patronizing.
Yeah, it's politically
but if you've done something for a handful of years and you believe something, but you believe something different, I like that somebody is thinking about a process and has a chutzpah to, or as you say, to state that, I've changed my mind on this.
Yeah. And, to your point, I have two friends. One's a very dear friend and one's a professional friend who both have worked in criminal defense as attorneys and at one time or another, and then worked on the prosecution side. And it's the same thing where you could look at that and say, whose side are you on? No, they learned along the way more about it and their depth of experience and their interpretation of what's important about that experience influenced their decision making. And I agree, politicians should be given the same latitude.
Yeah, I know. I think as I listened to my show just not too long ago, but I'm going to repeat something that I've repeated a lot, and that is, I like to say, never fully believe what I say today, because with more data tomorrow, I could have a different opinion. Because something came up I wasn't aware of, I didn't know, or I matured. Not maybe for the best, but I changed internally. My core me and my values shifted. Some peripheral values have shifted. And so I hear a lot about that in candidates, and we're getting a little bit into policies that I want to be careful of just a little bit.
If I may bring something up, a couple years ago, I was here interviewing Mayor John Stevens, and he was human enough to say, yeah, I thought we were creating this wonderful policy to have citizens make decisions about development, blah, 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 put it in the hands of the people, and the unintended consequences were so horrific, and we just didn't anticipate that we had to do an about-face and change it. I respect that. He said, this is what we did. It was well-intended. It did not work. We saw that. We owned it. We pivoted. And we should be willing as citizens to allow our politicians to do that, to learn and to err. If they're making errors in intended, it's going to happen sometimes. We don't have to string them up, do we? We can just let them grow.
And what is our fear in that? Does fear even have a role in there, or is it just about trustworthiness? Or
they bleed so much into each other. I am not sure, but definitely fear. There is fear and loathing in every conversation with everyone about voting. It's a necessary evil. It's no longer this great civic duty. I'm excited. I'm going to go vote. But it seems like it's an anvil hanging over people's heads. And maybe because we are all feeling that the consequences are so dire if we get the wrong person in whatever position. I don't know. I do know that for most of us, we've lived through our first pandemic. We're seeing global crises on many fronts, which has not happened since the 1950s. It's pretty scary. It's a scary time.
And you know, it is scary. This may be the scariest time because we're feeling it right now with Israel. We're talking the early days of World War.
Right.
That is
right.
And we have, those are the two things that I make today's universal or world fears make it say, people say we're in the worst of all times, but people have said that throughout history.
Yeah.
They've always, no matter where, used to say with Khrushchev. I remember with Khrushchev pounding his shoe, my goodness, communists are coming after us.
I wish you guys could see his face.
But look, if we think through that, we think about today is genuine. We have nuclear weapons that could destroy the world.
Yeah.
So it's not just one country taking over another country. Yeah. And we have, I don't care what your position, we have climate issues. Now, the cause of those climate issues, I think, is rightfully debated. But there are those who believe we don't have climate issues, which is like...
That's difficult to wrap my brain around.
Yeah. So that makes today very dangerous.
It does.
So people's fears are legitimate. They're always legitimate, but more real.
But yeah, they're not irrational fears. Our technology has evolved to a point where someone could use the technology we have today and send a nuclear weapon almost halfway around the globe. That wasn't a fear that we had decades prior. And the general, I don't know, the social discourse or the erosion of it that we see in America, I'm hearing, is happening around the world. We're all becoming less civil, as we talked about earlier, globally. So we have people that are at locking horns around the world, and our countries have greater capability of wiping out the planet. It's just a recipe for a fearsome moment.
Yes, I just broke the radio rule by just thinking and being silent. Sorry, everybody. I broke the radio rule by thinking. Don't think, Charlie, just talk. Yeah, my producer's giving me those signs. You know what I'm thinking? Let's go back onto fear, and then we can go back to, is the world ending or not? Which
it's not going to end because enough of us are going to push through the fear.
I was going on specific issues of fear. I don't want to go there. I'm going to, because I got two potentially caught up in one side versus another, and in my notes, I got up, so I'm throwing my notes away. But you said there's enough of us that want to overcome that fear. That is the opposite of cynicism. That is optimism. That is believing, and as I like to believe, in the goodness of every person. Now, they're broken. We're all broken. We're all broken and go crazy ways. But what does it mean to you that the spirit, the essence of the human being is good, is hopeful?
Yeah, I choose to think optimistically. Just like fear, it doesn't come naturally. I choose it. And I'm not sure I am as convinced as you are that there is good in every person, or that said good is reachable or dominant in them.
I have to agree. I can't disagree with you.
Yeah. I hope that there is attainable, touchable goodness in every person. I resign myself to believe that most people are good. And I resign myself to believe that most people don't want to hurt their neighbor or the planet or other countries or leave things worse for their children. I choose to believe that. I really do.
That's very Viktor Frankl. And what's the name of the book, Paul?
Man's Search for Meaning.
Man's Search for Meaning. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And in the Nazi concentration camp, he said they can control everything, but they can't control how you feel about something. What's your choice? You have choices always. And I'm a major advocate of choice, and that we have it. We have a choice in what we believe. If we choose to believe cynically, if we choose to take the low road, then that's where we're going to end up.
Then it will be.
Yeah, it will be.
Because it is a choice. We've talked about this. I came from a horrible foundational place when I was a young person, and I chose not to be a victim. I chose it.
This is a great way to wrap up, in a shorter show, to wrap up the subject of fear. And that is, we go back to understanding fear. I won't change the title, but the subtitle could be Choose Not to Fear. Fear is a choice. Yeah. And most often, not always obviously, but most often, or very often, let's put it that way. Very often. It's an unsubstantiated choice that we don't have, that the results of the fear aren't going to happen. They won't happen. And what if we choose another route?
Yeah. What if we choose to do the thing that we think is better, even if it's scary?
I'm going to wrap up with a poem by my favorite poet, mystic theologian, Steve Garnis Holmes. He's been on the show twice, and I love having him on the show. And he has just as a five-line poem that I don't even know the title of. But maybe this is not his whole poem. That's why I don't know the title, because I took it out of a poem. So it's part of another poem. But anyway, he writes this. In our anxiety or fear, we seek stability, addicted to the status quo. It's an old habit. But this is not so in the realm of God. The always predictable isn't always predictable. New life isn't about return, but about moving on.
I love that. I do.
Isn't that nice? New life is not about return. It's not about going back to anything, but it's about moving on. And that is with fear. We always must move on.
And we can't look backward.
Wendy Hooper Ross, you were way too cool.
I love you, man.
Thank you. Thank you for spending time with me. You know what? I put a YouTube video on the links. Is there anything else, any other way you want users or listeners to get a hold of you?
They could call me. They could email me. If you want to read my nerdy reports, that's always fun.
How do they get on that report list?
Yeah, go to wendyhooperross.substack.com.
Okay, .substack. Well, I'll get that in the notes right after the end of the show.
Super easy. Yeah.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to the next chapter with Charlie. And until next, this is Charlie Hedges signing off. Bye for now.